Hey guys, this morning I'm going to take a look at Brixies Advanced Theme Framework Library. The guys have done a great job to convert 700 templates in such a small amount of time. There are some errors that I found. This morning's really the first look that I've had at it. I spent maybe 5 minutes on it last week, but this morning's the first time I've had a really good chance to look at it. I've got some suggestions that I'm going to feed back to the guys. Again, they're suggestions, they're just my way of thinking, doesn't make me right and them wrong. There are always different views, but my point of view I'm going to put across here. And I'm going to show you what I would do to use these framework libraries. And I've got to say that I always would look at these as a starting point. This is your kickstart to your design. It's not necessarily the end point, so you need to do a little bit of work to make it work the way you want it to work. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to pick one of these templates. I've already decided which one because I'm going to use this layout here, which is kind of a little bento grid. And the reason I picked that is because it's got a featured item in there, which I want to look at how we target those and how I would reuse these. Now I'm going to rename these classes because I use the AT BEM converter, and I want to make sure that the names of my elements match the names of the classes. So I'm going to start with something new that I've been doing is with atomic design is if it's going to be a pattern, I'm going to start the class name with PAT. If it's going to be a molecule, I start with the class name with MOL. So I'm going to do PAT because this is a pattern, and this is going to be my, let's call it post features or featured post. So we're going to call it Pat Featured Post. I'm going to rename and copy. Come to my builder. I'm going to paste that into the builder, and I'm going to rename that element so that it matches the classes. I'm going to call that PAT Featured Post. Now that should match PAT Featured Post, PAT Featured Post. Now that way when I add additional elements in there and I use my BEM converter, they should match. So if we look in here, we've got a Pat Featured Post container info. It's all going to work as expected. Now we get down to this grid here, and that's okay, Pat Featured Post grid. We get to a card wrapper, and this is where it loses a little bit for me because of the naming. So what they've done here is they've called it card Pat Featured Post. So it would have been card featured post or whatever it was, the original name, which means that I can't use my Brix root keyword if I'm going to target these because it's changed the beginning of the class. So I would probably rename those. So I'm going to go through and just do that now. I'm going to go through and it's going to break these. So I'm going to go to my component class manager, bulk actions, we've got a rename, and I want to look for this Pat Featured Post card. Where's my card? There we go, card Pat Featured Post. Grab that name. So I just want to rename those, and I want to find that, and I want to change it to just the other way around. So I want posts, and just a comment here, I probably would have not have done this. I would have treated this as a molecule and given it its own BEM block starting point rather than using the featured post as part of that. I mean, you can do both, but I'd rather treat it as a molecule. So I'm going to apply this rename. Am I in the rename? I am. Apply that. And that's going to break my CSS for this because the CSS in here, if we look at the CSS for that style there, go to the content, have a look in here. So I'm going to view that full screen so it's a little bit easier to see. So it's got the card Pat Featured Post. I'm going to have to delete that and add that to the end there. So is there anything else that we need to rename? No. So that should be okay. Save that. It's going to refresh and we should be back in business. Okay, there we're back in business. So the styling is now working because we've renamed our card and we've also renamed the class name here, so the card is after that. Now why do I do that? Now I can grab all of this, copy that, and go to my root component up here, go into my CSS here, and I am going to paste that in there, and I'm going to delete that CSS styles. Close that. Now we're going to refresh, just make sure it's working correctly. Okay, and we've still got styles. So if I have a look at my Pat featured posts now it's using root dash card. If it had card at the beginning, it will not use the root placeholder to rename these. So why do I do it that way? Let's say we decide we want to duplicate this. I'm going to duplicate that whole thing, and I'm going to call this Pat featured services. All right. So I've got Pat featured services. Now to rename all this, all I have to do is right click, use my component class manager, my bulk actions. We want to duplicate the class of Pat featured posts. So we're going to look for that, and we're going to find that, and we're going to replace with Pat featured services. And we want to remove the old classes from the elements. Hit yes, apply. Okay, now we have Pat featured services with a class name. The CSS is exactly the same because it is using the root keyword, so we don't need to change any of this CSS. So we go back to our structure here. See, now we've got Pat featured services container, Pat featured services container info. So it's a really cool way of doing this kind of thing, right? Now I'm going to remove that. I'm just going to actually delete those classes because we don't want those. Services, Pat featured services. Make sure I'm not going to get anything else in there. Grab all of those, trash those, delete it from the trash. We're going to do some more things before we do that. Error deleting class, why? Okay, let's just do a refresh. Okay, back to our classes. We want to look for services. Oh, actually we put them in the trash, didn't we? So go into there. Okay, worked that time. So something buggy in Bricks there. All right, so what I'm going to look at now is how we're targeting each of these elements. This is a pretty simple bento grid, but what we're seeing here is we've got one here that looks like it's featured, but all of the styling is actually done at the class here. Now my typical way of working is to do all of my variables at the root level. So I'm going to come back to my Pat featured posts, go into my CSS, and up the top here, and remove that there because we've changed that, I'm going to start creating some variables. And I'm going to call that my background. Whoops. Always keeps to a standard. I always use the underscore for local scope variables, and keep whatever you use, just make it standard. Actually, it's a card background, isn't it? We want card background. Let's do just a I don't know, black T5. Okay, card. Heading, color, and we'll make that, I don't know, primary, D4. You can always change these later. Card, text, color, and we'll make that, let's make that primary. I don't know, let's make it D2. Okay, so we've got some variables here, text color. Now we're going to go card featured. You build this out so that you can use it. I mean, you may not need to do this on every build, but if you want this to be reusable, this is how I would recommend you build it. So we're going to say card featured background. We're going to go primary, maybe D3. Featured heading color, we're going to make it L4 maybe. and we're going to make that an L, maybe 5. Okay, so we've got some variables ready to go. What do we have here? That's just the columns. That's okay. So now we need to find out what are our class names that we need to target for these. So let's go to an actual card. Here's a card here, and on that card it's basically pat featured posts and then dash card dash featured. If we look at the styling on that, if we look at our background styling, see how they've set that to AT black directly? We can just leave that because we're going to be more specific, or we can override that. So I'm going to come back to our there, and we're going to start targeting. We'll go from the top here so it's easier to see. Whoops. Got an extra curly bracket for some reason. Okay, so we're going to target card wrapper. We're going to do roots, card featured. Okay, we're going to set our background to, unfortunately we can't copy and paste, sorry, we can't auto complete these, so we're going to have to just copy and paste those to make sure people like me with shit typing can get this done. Okay, so we've changed our background. Okay, now we're going to set our color to our text color. Okay, now we're going to target our H2, H3, maybe an H4, and we're going to set our color to our heading color. Oops. Okay, so that's that. Now why is our color not working there? Let's come back to that. Text color, primary. Let's actually have a look at that. Let's go look at the front end. Let's have a look at that card and see what's actually happening with it. So I'm going to use our Chrome DevTools. There. What's happening with our class there? AT white. It's a description. It's actually got, so that's actually got a class on it as well. So what we might have to do is remove that color definition there, or we need to make ours more specific. I think we'll just remove it. So if I just go to that there and we just remove the whatever's on it, it's the color, then we have nothing overriding our root there. Okay, so let's come back to here and have a look at our, we've got the icon, didn't we? So let's go to the icon. Okay. Card, icon. We'll make that secondary. Alright, and we'll do the same down here. Secondary, I'll just make that secondary as it is. Card icon color for featured. Okay, now we have an icon. Card, what is that called? Featured icon. Okay, so it's got the dash. So each the featured and the standard don't have that. So card, what we want is a pat featured posts, card, and then icon. Card. So let's grab that. Card. icon, and then you can make the color the color of that. Okay, we're setting our default icon color here, which we didn't copy the whole thing. See that color change there? Actually, we started with the feature. We probably should have started at the class. So I'm going to start that by going to my card. I'm going to set our card. What happened there? Did we get an extra? We did. Sometimes when you press enter up here, the superpower PSS is automatically adding your curly bracket to close it. We don't want that, so we're going to actually set these here. So we go. This looks like a lot of extra work, right? Wait till we actually get to the actual benefit of doing this. So we'll just grab those. Some of you are going, oh God, why would we want to do that? No, why would we want to do all that work just for, just set up a template? And I'll show you very shortly why you would do this. Okay, so that's our background, our color, our icon is done for our standard card. Now, I don't like that there, so I'm going to make that on a standard one. I'm going to make background a T6, so it's a bit lighter. And there we go. And then on our featured background, we're going to use featured. So that should be card featured. Card. Featured heading color. Accidentally put that in there. Heading color. Okay, so we've got a featured card there, and we need to do the icon. Just pinch that from there, paste it in. Featured. Card. Featured icon color. Is that not right? Root card featured icon. Try that as red. It works. So featured icon color. Okay. Okay, so now we've got our standard card, background, text color, the icon color, all that sort of stuff is all now set using these variables. The beauty of doing this is that we can create a variation on this. So if I go and repeat that pattern there, just going to duplicate that pattern there. Okay. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a variation on this. And I'm going to call this secondary. Okay. Now to change all of these classes here and all the way that looks, we just go back to our featured posts, go to the heading, grab that block there, back to our secondary, paste that in there, and now we start changing things. So let's say, for example, on our featured background, we want that to be secondary. And we want our heading color to be secondary. L4, there we go. And we want the text color to be secondary. And our featured icon color we want to be white. Okay, so we've just created a variation on that. So is our original? And there's our variation. All we've had to do is override these locally scoped variables that we created. So we've gone from a block in here. We've named that to be the same as what we would use in AT for the class converter. We've then renamed the actual card class so that the class converter will work for it. And then we've made a variation on that. So let's go one step further. I'm just going to right click on that there and go to my class converter. Now you can see we've got all these dots here. And these dots are here because it's not, the red ones means it's not going to create them, but the green ones means that it will create new new classes for those because the names don't match what is on the actual elements. So if you really wanted to get into it, you can go through and make sure that when you go to here, you go to cards, and on there, just make sure that these match the actual, so this just says card, that really should be pat featured, postcard featured, and that should be set as a root component because we don't want those. When we add things here, we don't want that to change. So on that class there, let's say we want to add a, under that, let's add another basic text, call that a call out. Okay, and we go to our class here. Now we want to make sure the name matches what we've got up here. So it gets a little tricky here. So we'd have to change that to pat featured postcard featured for us to be able to use this class converter and have that work, because these are incorrect because the BEM converter is based on the name of the element, and these classes here do not match that class here. So you've got to make sure that they match up so that it's really easy for you to continue to use that BEM converter. But that's pretty much it. Now for that side of things, that I'm going to show you now also. Let's say, for example, we've got this whole pattern here, and we want to reuse that for a different service. We want this to be pat services. So we're going to duplicate that. We're going to call this pat services. Okay, I'm going to go right click on that, class converter. We're going to, not our class converter, sorry, we're going to go into our component class manager. We're going to look for all of the, getting bulk actions. We want to duplicate, grab that name there, so the pat features posts. We're going to look for anything that has that. We're going to find that string, and we're going to replace that with pat services. Okay, and then we're going to tell it to remove the old classes from the elements, hit apply, save that. Now we have a services pattern. Try to drag and drop that. It's just locked up on me. Pat services, if we look at the name of that class, that element there, it matches the class name. If we have a look at the element under it, the container, it matches the class name. Everything matches, and because we put the CSS on that root element and we use the root placeholder, we don't need to change any of our CSS. We've got a complete copy of that. Now we can work on that separately from our featured posts. So that's the way I would work with these templates from Brixies and how I'd make them my own, but it is a little bit of work to get them set up in the first place. It's taken me longer than it would to actually do because I'm explaining it, but I think it's a really cool library. It uses ATF variables throughout, so it really lends itself well to Advanced SEMA. So that's it. I'm going to leave it at that.